Welcome to the channel where American history becomes simple, clear, and meaningful. Here, we don't just study dates and events, we learn English through real stories that shaped the United States. In today's episode, we explore Native American cultures, the first peoples of this land. As we move through this story, we'll discover how ordinary people slowly began to see themselves in a new way as Americans. So listen carefully, learn naturally, and travel back in time with us. Let's begin.
The first Americans. Imagine the world during the Ice Age, around 30,000 years ago. Huge sheets of ice covered much of the planet, locking away enormous amounts of water. Because of this, sea levels dropped dramatically. Between Asia and North America, the sea almost disappeared. In its place, a wide land bridge emerged. This land was called Beringia. At its widest point, Beringia stretched nearly 1,500 kilometers. It was cold, open, and treeless, but not empty. Grasses and plants grew across the tundra, attracting large animals such as mammoths and bison. Where animals went, humans followed. Small groups of hunters slowly moved east along the Siberian coast. They were not explorers searching for a new continent. They were simply following food, just as their ancestors had done for thousands of years. Without realizing it, they crossed into North America. When these early people reached Alaska, their journey was far from over. Massive glaciers blocked the way south. It would take thousands of years for them to find paths through the ice and spread into the lands that are now the United States. Over time, human life became firmly established across the continent. Archaeological discoveries in Alaska and places like Clovis, New Mexico, show finely crafted spear points and hunting tools. These findings suggest that by 10,000 BC, people were living throughout much of North and South America. As the climate slowly warmed, life began to change. Mammoths disappeared, and bison became the main source of food and clothing. When large animals became scarce, people adapted. They gathered plants, berries, and seeds, and slowly began experimenting with early agriculture. In central Mexico, Native Americans started growing corn, beans, and squash as early as 8,000 BC. This knowledge spread north over centuries. By 3000 BC, corn was being grown in the river valleys of the American Southwest. Eventually, villages appeared. Irrigation systems were built. By the 1st centuries AD, the Hohokam people were living in organized settlements near present-day Phoenix, Arizona. They constructed canals, ball courts, and pyramid-like mounds, clear signs of a complex and lasting society. North America was no longer a land of only wandering hunters. It had become a continent of growing cultures and civilizations.
Mound builders and pueblos. As Native American societies grew more complex, some began to leave permanent marks on the land. Around 600 BC, a group now known as the Adena people started building large earthen mounds in what is today the eastern United States. These were not simple hills of dirt. Many were burial sites, while others likely served religious and ceremonial purposes. Some were shaped like birds or long, winding serpents, suggesting deep spiritual meaning that is still not fully understood. Over time, the Adena culture faded or was absorbed by new groups called the Hopewell people. The Hopewell were not one single tribe, but a network of connected communities spread across a vast area. One of their most important centers was in southern Ohio, where thousands of mounds can still be seen today. The Hopewell were remarkable traders. They exchanged copper, shells, stone tools, and other materials across hundreds of kilometers. This wide trade network connected distant regions and helped their culture flourish. But by around 500 AD, the Hopewell Society also declined, making way for a new and powerful culture. This next group is known as the Mississippian culture, sometimes called the Temple Mound Builders. They built large towns centered around massive flat-topped mounds used for ceremonies and leadership. The greatest of these cities was Cahokia, located near present-day Illinois. At its height, in the early 1100s, Cahokia may have had 20,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in North America at the time. At its center stood an enormous mound, rising 30 meters high and covering 37 hectares at its base. Around it were more than 80 smaller mounds, showing careful planning and strong leadership. These cities depended on farming, hunting, trade, and foraging. Influenced by powerful societies to the south, they developed strict social hierarchies. Some practiced slavery and even human sacrifice, revealing both the strength and the harsh realities of their world. Far to the southwest, another remarkable culture was taking shape. The ancestral Pueblo people, ancestors of today's Hopi, began building stone and adobe villages around 900 AD. Their homes were unlike anything seen before. They constructed apartment-like pueblos, often built directly into cliff faces for protection. The most famous site, Mesa Verde in Colorado, included more than 200 rooms. Another massive settlement, Pueblo Bonito in New Mexico, once contained over 800 rooms, connected by roads and trade routes. Meanwhile, along the Pacific Northwest coast, nature provided extraordinary abundance. Rich fishing waters and plentiful forests allowed people to form permanent villages as early as 1000 BC. Food was so plentiful that wealth could be displayed openly. Their famous potlatch ceremonies, filled with gifts, feasting, and celebration, became symbols of status and power, unmatched in early American history. Long before Europeans arrived, North America was home to diverse, advanced, and thriving societies, each shaped by its environment and traditions.
Native American cultures. When the first Europeans finally arrived, they did not step into an empty wilderness. By that time, the Western Hemisphere was already home to millions of people. Historians now believe that the population of the Americas may have been close to 40 million, similar to Western Europe. In the land that would later become the United States, estimates range widely, but even the lowest numbers point to millions of Native Americans living there. These societies were incredibly diverse. From frozen northern forests to warm southern plains, Native Americans adapted to many different environments. No single way of life defined them all. In the eastern woodlands and the Midwest, most tribes combined hunting, fishing, gathering, and farming. Corn, beans, and squash formed the foundation of their diet. Daily life was shaped by clear roles. Women usually farmed and managed food supplies, while men hunted and defended the community. Native American life was deeply connected to the land and nature. Rivers, forests, animals, and the sky were not just resources, they were spiritual forces. Religious beliefs were tied to the natural world, and respect for the environment was central to everyday life. Their societies were strongly communal and clan-based. Children were raised with more freedom than in European families of the same period, and cooperation mattered more than strict authority. Unlike Europeans, most Native Americans did not rely on written records. Although some groups developed symbolic writing, their cultures were mainly oral. History, knowledge, dreams, and values were passed down through stories, spoken carefully from one generation to the next. Trade connected tribes across vast distances. Goods, tools, food, and ideas moved along established routes. Neighboring tribes formed relationships that could be friendly or hostile, but they were rarely isolated. However, everything began to change with the arrival of Europeans. European diseases, especially smallpox, spread faster than any army. Entire villages were wiped out before people even understood what was happening. These diseases caused far more deaths than early wars and battles, leading to a dramatic population decline during the 1600s. Long before colonization reshaped the continent, Native American cultures were rich, complex, and deeply rooted in the land they had lived on for thousands of years.
America was built by many hands, free, unfree, and forgotten. Their stories still matter today. If history helps us understand the present, then remembering these people is a responsibility. If you found this story useful, like the video, subscribe, and continue learning history through stories.